Hello, everyone. Welcome to Wine, Women, and Words. I am Michelle, and with me, of course, is Diana.
Hello.
And this evening, we are joined by author Ann Mah, who is, of course, the author of the book we've been obsessing over, The Lost Vintage. And tonight is going to be a little bit like speed dating for Wine, Women, and Words, because it's going to be a little bit of a shorter episode, but that's okay. We'll just talk fast like we usually do. So thank you so much for joining us, Anne. We have been obsessing. I mean, Diana can show you her book. She has highlighted sections and paperclip sections. So we're really excited to talk about this book with you.
Well, thanks for having me. It's really a treat to be here.
Absolutely. So we can do should we do our round robin of wine, or should we do it
into the questions?
Okay.
Because I've got questions I'm dying to talk about.
Okay, well, you go first because you have been making questions since like December 2nd.
Okay. Well, one of the things that I want to talk about, I mean, setting it in France, and I want to get your thoughts on Michelle, you go, because I'm trying to put my question together because I didn't actually write this one down.
Sure. So we'll start at the very beginning, but there are so many fascinating plot points about the Lost Vintage. I mean, we could focus on, World War II and occupied France and, Cat in modern day, but what was the original idea that initially drew you into the story?
Well, the book was, I was inspired by some time I spent in the Champagne region of France. I volunteered for the grape harvest there in 2015. And both Champagne and also Burgundy, which is where the book is set, I was lucky enough to visit and was in both places completely captivated by how beautiful the landscape was and how beautiful the little villages were. Clearly places that have been cultivated and loved for centuries and have really known no fine economic hardship over, the entire course of history, basically, once wine was invented and started being made there. But along with that beauty came sort of a sense of ghosts and haunting. And when I didn't understand it at first, but when I started doing more research about France and learning more about the role of the wine industry during World War II, it all began to make a little more sense to me.
And I love the juxtaposition that you did with the old and the new, and that conflict between the change and keeping with traditions. Was that something that really struck you when you were there and when you were writing the book?
So I lived in France for several years, and one thing that I've noticed is that in my last book, I wrote about French cuisine and sort of a short biography of 10 of signature dishes of French cuisine, and that really was a window into learning about French history and culture and the way everything is tied together, how food becomes a part of the region and a source of pride, the individual dishes. But also that there is a great sense of legacy and of preserving this legacy. So that was absolutely something that I think is very much an intrinsic part of French culture, and something that I admire a lot and something that I wanted to relay in this book.
Yeah, you absolutely relate, especially that tripe scene in the book is so memorable and so much fun. I know Michelle and I had a thorough discussion about tripe in dishes after we read that part.
So tripe I was introduced to in my last book, which is the memoir about French cuisine, when I visited a town called Troyes, which is actually in the Champagne region, and their famous dish is andouillette, which is a tripe sausage. So that was really my first introduction to tripe in general, visiting like a butcher who made this sausage and also a factory where the sausage is made. And it really was a memorable
That's a great way to put it.
Well, and then I always love the acknowledgments in a book because I love learning about, you know, where you got a lot of your inspiration and your influences from. And I read that a lot of your inspiration for Helene was influenced by a memoir by Agnes Humbert.
Mhm.
Tell us a little bit about her, like how you came across her first and what her life was like.
So the book is called Resistance, or it's in French, Résistance. And I discovered it just through the local library. I was reading a lot about the women's war, and the role of women during World War II, and that was a book that I found in my research. Agnès Humbert was a very early resistance from almost the very beginning of the occupation. She worked at, I think it was like the Museum of the Man. It's like an anthropological museum in Paris. Mm-hmm. And she and her comrades formed a sort of band of resistance across many different museums. They were very, very brave, almost to the point of being foolhardy. And her memoir is about those early days as part of the resistance. And then she was captured and put in prison, and she spent most of the war, in prison in Paris and then in a work camp. But what struck me about that book was her voice was so clear and so moving and so honest and brave and courageous. She really believed in France and in the goodness of people, and that was why she had become a resistant and joined the movement so early. The book just touched me very much. One of the saddest things about Agnès Humbert is, although she survived the war, in the work camp in terrible, terrible conditions, most of her friends died. Almost all of them died, either through disease or the hardship in prison, or they were shot. Mm-hmm. And her writing about that is incredibly moving.
And now, I loved how you portrayed the collaborators and the many shades of that, because we all like to think that, okay, if something like that were to happen, we'd all be resistance. Mm-hmm. We like to think that when we look back at history, we glorify the resistance and that everybody is the resistance. But I love how you pinpointed on the collaborators and those tough choices, because, you know, we don't know, because you and Michelle are both mothers. So when your child is sick, well, what are you going to do to take mm-hmm. care of your child? Those are really tough choices. What made you want to talk about those collaborators in the way that you did?
So I think it was, the heart of the book is really about the horizontal collaborators, or the women who were accused of sleeping with German soldiers. And in researching the war, that was one of the stories that struck me and really touched me. Made me very sad and angry, because their stories still remain so untold. We can't imagine what it was like to be them during the war. We can't imagine the fear, the choices, or, you know, although we all want to believe the best of ourselves, we can't imagine the choices we would make. But the most horrible part for them, for so many who were accused, is, although some had indeed slept with Nazi soldiers, many of them had done it out of, you know, trying to provide food for their children or medicine for their kids, mm-hmm. or many of them were falsely accused. Mm-hmm. And after the war, it was like a mob came after them. It was a mob mentality outside of the rule of law. There were no courts. There were no tribunals. It was just mass of anger directed at these women who became scapegoats for the shame of France and the shame of the occupation.
Yeah, it felt a lot like in some ways, the witch trials, the Salem witch trials in some ways. And in some ways it also felt like as much as this might be, I don't want to make it sound belittling, but also the tribunals in Harry Potter, after the Voldemort thing, it felt a lot like that, where they wanted these scapegoats and people were just calling out names. And so it brought back, like, well, maybe this is where J.K. Rowling got her inspiration from for that. Because it felt a lot like that, because they were the scapegoats. So, and I love the way you portrayed those different shades. That, I think that's my biggest compliment on the book, in that, because it shows the different ranges of humanity.
I had forgotten that about the Harry Potter books, but you're absolutely right. And I know she has studied France and French history, so maybe that is part of her inspiration.
Maybe.
One of the most shocking things to me about the violence after the war, they called it the Wild Perch, was that it was directed by men, yet the men who were themselves collaborators went largely unpunished, and also that that many of the men who were leading the purge were in fact trying to cleanse their own records from what they had done during the war.
Well, that was that one line, and please don't mind my laundry basket in the background. I just saw that, and that's awful. I usually downstairs, but my kids are still awake, and no one wants that in the recording right now. They're crazy. But the one line, and I'm not going to get it right, but what Helene was saying, that she realized it wasn't necessarily her that they were punishing. They were trying to distance themselves, and they were trying to purge themselves by punishing her, which
Absolutely.
I thought was incredibly gracious of her to make that acknowledgement. I don't think I would even want to think that highly, think that kindly on them.
I mean, some of the stories that I read in researching the book were completely shocking. The tiny amount of contact that some women had with German soldiers, who were then turned upon and punished after the liberation. A hat maker, she was a funeral wreath maker, would just sit in her window, and a German soldier would stand outside her window and chat with her, and he never even entered her home. And after the liberation, the mob came for her and drove her from the town, and all the terrible things happened to her, stripped her, stoned her, painted swastikas on her, and just from that tiny amount of contact.
It's so awful, and it shows that throughout history, women have a tendency to be the scapegoats for all the awful things. But one thing we want to talk about, of course, because we're wine women in words, is the wine in this. Now, are you a sommelier yourself, or do you just have a lot of knowledge about the wine industry?
So I'm definitely not a sommelier, but to write the book, I did a lot of research, and that included taking classes through the WSET, the Wine and Spirits Education Trust, which is a British organization. They are the administrators of the Master of Wine program, which in the contemporary story of the book, the main character wants to become a Master of Wine, which is one of the highest distinctions in the wine world. So I took classes through them. And I took enough classes to know that I could never be a wine expert. But it was a great experience. And I really wanted to be accurate in writing about wine, and using the correct terms, and, describing the soil. So I've read so many novels in vineyards where the soil is described as rich, and moist, but that's not wine soil, just stuff like that.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I got as far as Googling it and then going, okay, I can't do this. So you are a better woman than I for taking those classes.
Well, I have to admit, they were really competitive.
I can imagine so, especially with the wine industry the way that it is. And now the only thing that's going through my mind is how Michelle and I can go volunteer for the grape harvest.
Right? I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yes. So it definitely is a thing. And I wrote an article that experience turned into a travel article for the New York Times. And part of the article was like a sidebar on how people can set up their own experiences volunteering for the harvest. So
okay, I'm going to go look that up because I totally see a Lucy and Ethel moment happening with like Michelle and I. So that is so going to happen.
Start doing your squats now.
On it. I have goals, my New Year's resolution, something to get me to exercise.
Now, and you mentioned your work as a journalist. Now, as a freelance journalist for a small county newspaper, I'm fangirling hardcore that I'm talking to someone who has been published by the New York Times. But how much of your experience as a writer was able to help shape the story? And obviously, your volunteering during the harvest and that article played a major role. Were there any other stories or assignments that helped shift or direct the novel?
So one part of the travel article that I didn't mention was that as a volunteer at the grape harvest, I stayed in the Vineyard House for free. I got free lodging and meals in turn for picking the grapes. But because I was the only woman, they put me in an empty apartment in the Vineyard House, which hadn't been lived in for many years, like maybe since the 1960s. And it was completely empty of furniture. The wallpaper was peeling from the walls. It was huge. It was an enormous apartment. The floors were extremely creaky. And I stayed in one room, which was the only furnished room, and the bed was like a hospital bed from the 1950s.
Oh, God.
In the daytime, I was fine, but at night, it was so dark and so silent outside that my imagination just went crazy, and I was certain that the place was haunted. I slept with the lights on.
Oh, God.
Every time I would turn in the bed, it would creak and wake me up. So I ended up sleeping with the lights on, and when I woke up, I would write in my journal to try to calm myself down. And it was those journal entries that became sort of the initial base of the book.
That's so cool. Well, thank you so much. I know we do our fault on the scheduling. I do apologize profusely for that. My fault specifically, but thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
It was great to chat with you guys. Thanks for having me.
And we really appreciate it. We love the book. And for those of you who are listening, be sure to get your copy of The Lost Vintage now. It's available everywhere. And we do look forward to more books from you. We do expect more books from you. And when you do have another book, we'll have to have you back on the show at the proper time and all of that.
Well, I would love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Have a great night.
So before we go off air and my computer started, the fan started whirring really loud for anyone watching the YouTube. So I had to pick it up and hold it because I've been resting it on pillows since I'm upstairs. So that's why it's super wobbly. But did we want to do a round robin of wine?
We should. And let's also talk about all the awesome stuff we have coming up.
Mm-hmm.
Because we have an awesome year planned, guys. Seriously, guys, we are booked until May for awesome authors. And I am so excited. And we're going to start sharing an infographic soon so you guys can see and prepare and read the books of the month with us. But yeah, let's do our round robin. What are you drinking?
Honestly, I have no idea.
Okay.
Obviously
it's a red, so you got my memo.
It is a red. My mom is visiting from North Carolina for Christmas. And we went down to Italy, of course.
Of course.
And she got this awesome red something. I finished my Wink wine last week. And it's Christmas and budgeting on myself is slightly limited right now. So, but this is delicious. Whatever it is, I'll have to look it up, but it's yummy.
I'm still working on the Rosa Obscura red blend, and it is lovely, and I'm almost finished with it, thankfully. I mean, I do enjoy it. I always feel so accomplished when I finish a bottle of wine.
So, yes.
Exactly. You go, girl. You finished something today.
You did it.
I know. So, yeah, it's the Rosa Obscura. It's from Wink, and you guys can try it out too. Just go to trywink.com/www podcast, and you can get $22 off your first order of wine with them. So, yay! With that, let's talk about what we have coming up in January. So, you guys may have seen this book around. Love the ironing board. Love it.
Thanks.
It's so cute. So what we have coming up in January is we have the 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. That is going to be a brunch episode that we're going to do. So we're not going to be on our regular Thursday night. So we're going to be about a day or two behind on schedule for our episode because Stuart will be joining us from Australia.
Woohoo!
I know, crazy. I was like, oh, we're going to get England again because last year we had the Paris Secret. And he was like, oh, I'm going to be in Australia for those dates, but I can make it work. And I was like, that's awesome. So we're going to have Australia on our map now. We need to have like a map of.
I was just going to say, we need to get a map and put pins in it from.
Or they have those really cool ones with the coins that where you can scratch them off.
I wonder if you could do like a custom made Wine, Women, and Words map.
Oh, that would be so awesome.
I'm going to have to look into that.
You will have to look into that because I think we will need one. So I'm so excited to have him on the show to join us. We're going to be very historical fiction heavy because there's so many awesome historical fiction books coming out next year. In March, we've got Learning to See from Elise Hooper. She's going to be about that one. I know. And Greer's going to be joining us again. Greer is always a fantastic time. I love having Greer. So I can't wait to talk to her about Woman 99, which is about your idol, Michelle.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Fangirl. Like, I think we even talked about Nellie Bly at some point in time on the show.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe even with Greer before we knew what her book was about.
About her a couple times.
Yeah. So yeah, so excited. I think this is probably the first. Oh, I'm sure there has to be other historical fiction books about her, but this will be the first one that I've heard about. But so excited! I cannot wait to read that one.
And then let's see here. I forget what I don't have my calendar with me. I forget what our April. Oh, she is our April book. And then our May book of the month, I am blanking on. That's the one I'm blanking on.
Isn't that Gwendolyn?
Gwen is June. We're having Gwendolyn Womack back, guys, for her new book. It's coming out in June. I can't wait for that one, too. I'll have to look up what our May book of the month is. You'll see it on the infographic when we share it with you guys. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, by the way. We've been posting a lot of updates on there. It's Wine, Women, Words. Real simple to remember. We're on there. Check us out. Follow us. We post all about the books. We do discussions. So definitely check that out. And then we also have for February, I feel like we need a drum roll because I am so excited. And it is taking, I want you to know, Michelle, it is taking all of my willpower not to dive into it over the Christmas weekend. Because we have our arcs already. And I've had the arc and it has been tormenting me. And I want to read it so badly. I cannot wait to have Shan back in February because we're going to talk about the Kingdom of Copper and we're going to pick up where my book boyfriend left off because we got it last time he was in a very precarious situation and I've got to know that he's okay.
I am still waiting for the zombie conspiracy that I am convinced has happened. I am convinced that he is partly evil.
Oh, I can't. I honestly can't wait to talk to her again and dish on this book. Because seriously, guys, if you have not picked up The City of Brass. This is your opportunity to do so. You can read it over the Christmas weekend, or make sure that Santa has a copy in your stocking or under your tree, because Kingdom of Copper comes out in January. And we loved City of Brass so much that we literally, she was our first guest for 2019 that we had booked. Because as soon as the show wrapped, we were like, okay, 2019, February.
No, not as soon as it wrapped. During the show.
Oh, that's right, during the show.
On record, agreeing to come back.
I was not going to let her go without getting her to commit to come back on the show.
But yes, we're very, 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 very excited for that one.
And we have Chris Humphreys coming back for our weekly episodes. We have so many awesome authors. I can't wait to have Chris back because I've got at least 2 more of his books that I plan on reading. And then we've got, I'm forgetting one of our other authors that we have coming up. Fly Girls, I know, is the name of the book. That's coming up in January. Lisa C. is going to be joining us in March. We're going to get to talk about her book. I am super excited to read Etaf Rum's book, A Woman is No Man. I am super, super stoked about that one. And just so many books, so many authors that we're going to have that we just get to, I think the most fun I have with the show, besides having an excuse to read books all the time, is the fact that we get to like talk to the authors and get into their minds about how they think and what inspired them.
All right. It was a really pretty cover, and it's something about a chef, and I can't remember.
That's our May book, The Chef's Secret by Chris King. Thank you.
Got you.
Thank you. You got me. This is why we are a partnership. Yes, she is going to be our May book of the month, and I'm so excited because her books have been on my to be read list for a while. She's like one of those authors I've been meaning to get around to reading, and I just haven't. So basically, we have a lot going on in 2019. Mm-hmm.
You have a heads up on which books you should focus on. For instance, I just submitted my Christmas list to my husband, and he went and went shopping today, and I am barred from checking our bank account because otherwise I'll know which stores he shopped at.
You know what's funny is my husband was like, so how can I go somewhere without you knowing that I went somewhere? Because if I go there, you're going to know what I bought you. And my response was,
cash.
Exactly. There's this thing called cash at these ATMs. I know we don't really use them anymore, but you should totally give that a try. So yeah, he did that. And also, guys, that reminds me, if you are following us on Instagram, my dad, who was on the show last week, we are giving away a copy of his book, Italianita, The Essence of Being Italian and Italian American. And I just dropped it on the floor.
That's what she thinks of it. No, just kidding. Just kidding.
Just kidding, Dad. I really, really love your book. No, but guys, go to our Instagram. Tell us what your holiday traditions are. That's all you have to do. Just tell us what your holiday tradition is, and you can win a copy of the book. And it's informative. If you like Italian culture, this will give you an insight into it. Or, even if you're not Italian, it's for Italians and Italians at heart.
I can still hear my children talking downstairs. Why are they still awake?
Because you are still here with me, and you're the one who lays down the law.
True story.
I was just guessing on that because usually moms are the ones who lay down the law.
Well, I am the one who lays down bedtime. Literally. All right. Well, everyone have a wonderful holiday.
Mm-hmm.
And drink lots of wine and have amazing memories with your family.
Yes, and the plan is I'm going to try to do our greatest hits episode with some clips from some of our previous episodes. But barring that, we will be back live after the New Year's holiday. We'll be back on that first Thursday in January.
Woohoo!
Yeah, so be sure to join us.
3rd year. What?
I know, crazy, right? Yeah, I still like you after all this time. Wow, I'm still loving Christmas cheer tonight. Let me drink more wine.
All right, everyone, have a good night, and we'll see you next year.
Good night, guys. Merry Christmas. Bye.